Hello, and welcome to Talking Toddlers, where I share more than just tips and tricks on how to reduce tantrums or build your toddler's vocabulary. We're going to cover all of that, but here, our goal is to develop clarity, because in this modern world, it's truly overwhelming. This podcast is about empowering moms to know the difference between fact and fiction, to never give up, to tap into everyday activities so your child stays on track. He's not falling behind, he's thriving through your guidance. We know that true learning starts at home, so let's get started. This episode, we will cover 7 early signs of autism that every parent should know. I want to walk through these very specific and detailed areas that we as therapists and clinicians have looked at for years upon years. And it does not suggest that you absolutely have a child with autism if you see him or her exhibiting 1 or 2 of these areas. And so if you are concerned, please pick up the phone and call your state, call your pediatrician, call a therapist, call a friend, really try to get a referral. But in the meantime, don't just wait. Always, always, always be proactive and think about what can you do? How can you adjust your everyday life, your parenting style, your rhythm to your language, your rhythm to your life, so you can bring out the best in your little guy or your little gal. But do reach somebody and talk to them and see if you can get a formal evaluation if you have more than 2 of these areas that seem to be a red flag for you. So there are several factors, as you can probably imagine, that contribute to autism, one of which could be genetics. However, now, after 35 years of me being in the thick of it, when hundreds, if not thousands, practitioners, we have collected a lot of information looking at numerous environmental factors that also play a role. Perhaps it's not the one and only reason why someone is exhibiting some of these behaviors. However, there are always a number of variables that we should take a look at. And there are, as you can imagine, because we refer to it as autistic spectrum disorder, then that spectrum, kids at any age can move around on this continuum, on this spectrum, and present differently depending on their life experience thus far, whether it's 12 months or 18 months or 36 months, and that every family dynamic is different, right? And so it's not an absolute just 1-to-1 correlation of genetics. And through my experience, that has been so clear to me. My personal and professional suggestion is always look at what you can do in your natural everyday life to change the trajectory of your child's development. It's not to change his heart and soul or who he is in his essence, but it's always about parenting at your best so you can serve your child and then they can develop into their best version. So keep in mind what you as a parent do matters. Let's look at the 7 signs. There are differences, different gradations in all of this. You can be the detective, the primary data collector. In another episode, I will discuss some of the changes that have occurred in the last several years regarding the diagnostic manual, the DSM-5. But for now, I just want to share these 7 developmental behaviors that we notice as red flags in a child's early development. So number 1 has to do with eye contact. And I think the average person out there that has heard of autism at all has heard whether someone does or doesn't have quote unquote good eye contact. But I want to talk about what that truly means. It presents itself as not being consistent, using eye contact to gain another person's attention. It's not just that they'll look at you in passing or even look at you and smile and then go on about their business. That's what we refer to as fleeting eye contact. That true eye gaze, eye connection is a nonverbal form of communication. And that kids will use it at a very, very young age to start a conversation. Like, hey, you want to do something? Hey, look at me. I'm kind of, cute and sassy. Or they'll look at you to express a thought. Like, say they just dumped a big pile of blocks and it made a big noise, and they look at you like, yeah, I did that. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to come and join me? Or is that a good thing or a bad thing? But they're looking at you to say, want me to do it again? There's a reason behind their eye gaze, right? It's also used to confirm. So they'll say they're crawling away. They're 8, 9, 10 months old, and they're crawling away toward a basket that looks interesting or new or whatnot. And they'll look back at you like, hey, I'm leaving your vicinity. I'm more than 2 feet away from you. Is that okay? And I'm going to touch this basket over here. What do you think? So it's that eye gaze is really communicating a purpose, right? And the consistency is key. And it's hard, I know, for new parents to really understand what consistency is. But it's not just fleeting. It's not just once in a while. It's not just kind of a social smile. That it's really a form of interaction. And that's what's most important. So number 2 would be not using gestures, which is the biggie. And I've talked and mentioned this, 16 gestures by 16 months. But it's really, really important because gestures, whether they're hand gestures or body gestures or facial expressions, or even this eye gaze is a gesture like, look at me, is this okay, right? Like, yeah, I'm going to do this. But other specific gestures would be at 12 months, you really see them using nonverbal communication, gestures, to communicate, right? So at 9 months, they'll give you something, like they'll hand you a new toy. What do I do with this? Or show me how it works, or come play. They'll also shake their head, no, because at 9, 10 months, they're creating an opinion of likes and dislikes. At 10 months, they'll reach for something, or they'll reach toward, say you're eating watermelon or something, they'll reach toward it like, give me a piece. I want some. It looks good. They'll also raise their hands up, like, pick me up. I want to be a part of the big world. I don't want to be stuck on the ground down here, or stuck in my playpen, or stuck in a car seat. I want to be in the hustle and bustle. At 11 months, they'll actually show you a book. Like, here, let's do this. I like this. This is my favorite book. Or if grandma comes in to visit, they'll run and just share anything because they know that that's a way of communication. I can't really say, hey, grandma, I missed you. Let's play, but I'll bring you my dolly, or I'll bring you my bubbles, which will then speak for itself, like, come and play with me. Come and engage. And at about 11 months, that's really when they start using the wave, right? Goodbye. And it could mean a lot of things. It could mean hello. It could mean goodbye. It could mean I'm done, go away. That kids have done that to me millions of times at the doorstop when mom and I are still chatting and they're waving like, okay, stop talking, Erin, move on. And then it's about 12 months of age when they really have an open hand point. So they're not necessarily using that precise index finger just yet, but they'll have an open hand and it's kind of modified, pointing with their whole hand, like, look at that airplane, look at that bird, look at that school bus, look at, let's go over here, let's go back over on the slide, let me get some more watermelon, whatever they're going to point to, but they want to communicate with you and share something like, I want that, or look where I'm looking. And then there is a tapping, right? And again, it's more like the fingers are still open and together. It's not that precise pointing. That doesn't develop for a couple more months, but they're tapping things like, look at that boy is swimming if it's in a picture, or look at that duck, he's flying. Or if you ask them, show me the bear, or show me the frog, or who says ribbit, 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 that they can then point to it and find it, right? And right around that first birthday, they become much more enthusiastically using these gestures, because all of these gestures are precursors to their language, their spoken language explosion. And so at 13 months, they'll clap. That's when they clap for joy and clap for celebration and, clap because everybody else is clapping and they're happy, right? They'll also blow kisses, again, for purpose. Up until this point, you've been helping them do that. Blow a kiss or wave goodbye or point or reach. And so you've been doing a lot of hand over hand, or you've been modeling it for them. And so it's been these emerging skills. But now around that 12th month, 13th month, they're really exploding. And that's what you want to see, that they're using a wide variety of gestures. And it's right on the precipice of verbal spoken language. And what I want parents to look for is quality versus quantity, and that there are different patterns of behavior. If he's just waved once or twice, that's different than if he waves each and every day when he says goodbye to his brother who goes off to school. And that consistency is key. And as a therapist, I look at that they not only do it at home or with their brother, that they do it out in the street, and they do it in the grocery store, and they do it at Aunt Susie's house, that across different environments. And then that's considered mastery. That's when they own it. One of my mentors over the years used to say that it needs to be strong and stable, not a hit and miss. Because that's a form of communication. That's a form of mastery. Now, a child may grab your hand and pull you to get something off the counter, or pull you to open up the heavy door that he wants to go and play, or open up the fridge. But he's using you as a tool. He's not necessarily communicating and sharing something with you. And typically, kids who are having challenges with these developmental areas, the eye contact isn't there. Because say he wants something off the counter, whether he wants something to eat or drink or to play, he sees a toy up there, that he'll grab your hand and pull you toward it, but he'll have a grunt like, and he'll look at you, and he'll look at the object, and he'll look at you. That it's all this interconnection of, I want that toy that's up on the top, or I want another cookie, or I want a popsicle, or I want to go outside. But when a child is just using you as a purpose to reach for something and give it to him, then that lacks that connection. It lacks a confirmation of connectivity, and it lacks true communication, even being nonverbal. And then the third identifying red flag would be that they don't imitate. And again, it goes back to consistency. They should be imitating actions and gestures, doing stuff. Because the average typical toddler, that 1, 2, and 3-year-old, loves to copy the grown-ups, loves to do what mama's doing, or do what daddy's doing, or do what big brother or sister are doing. Whether you're brushing your hair, brushing your teeth, they want to do it. If you're trying to wipe off the table, they want to be involved. If you're dusting or sweeping or stirring or rinsing off, they do it too. You come home with the groceries or you're trying to fold the bags. They're going to be in the middle of it with you. The problem is they're not very skilled yet and they're still really little. They're not very accurate and they want to be helpful, but it really does become a thorn in your side, especially if you're busy. But it's really important that we help them be a part of it and not discourage them, even if it's a messy job at folding the towels. But these are all imitations, gestures, and actions are all huge predictors of spoken words. So we can look at where a child's speech and language skills and nonverbal communication gestures, actions, and imitation ability at 18 months of age and be fairly accurate of what their overall social language and communication skills will be at 36 months. And so we've seen enough over the last several decades to understand that correlation. Is it absolute? No, but it puts kids in different risk groups. So keep in mind that the 16 gestures by 16 months are really, really important. At 14 months of age, that's typically when they'll start using that index finger to point, and they'll say approximated words like da, like what is that, right? When they point at something at a picture, or they point to something that they've never seen before. They'll also use that index finger to go shh, 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 like hush, and they'll often say the sound with it, and they know that they have to use a quiet voice, or the baby's sleeping, or don't wake up the dog, or something to that effect. Again, looking at you, looking at the object or the activity, and then using the gestures for purpose. At 15 months of age, that's when they'll do the head nod for confirmation. Up to this point, they're pretty much just shaking the head like, no, I don't want to go to bed. No, I don't want to eat any more broccoli. They have enough fine motor coordination around 15 months of age that they'll do the thumbs up. That's another form of saying, yes, I really like that. They'll also do a hand up, like to wait. Like if you say, hey, Johnny, we got to go now. They'll put their hand up like, yep, give me a minute. I'm still playing in the dirt here. Or hold on, I'm coming. Again, that's a nonverbal gesture to say, I hear you, I acknowledge you, I'm confirming you, but I'm busy right now. They'll also wave in front of their face like if something's stinky. My daughter used to always do that when I would cook Brussels sprouts, if something's stinky, right? And then at about 16 months of age, they become a little more sophisticated where they can kind of shrug their shoulders like, I don't know, or they'll put both their hands up like by their shoulders as they shrug. It's like, I don't know. Where did your brother go? I don't know. And usually around 16 months, that's where they'll consistently use high five as a form of saying hello, right? Or great job. And some kids will even do the peace sign like hello or goodbye or thank you. Again, a hand gesture that's a little bit more fine motor coordinated. Depending on where you live, they'll even do like a hang loose if you're from Texas, or they'll do the I love you, right? I've seen a number of 2- and 3-year-olds using I love you as a nonverbal cue to mom. But keep in mind that these later gestures reflect what they're thinking, like pointing to something like, I want that, or saying shush, shush, shush. But it's a form of sharing their ideas with others. And that's the key, that 12, 14, 16, 18 month are sharing events in their house with others. And that's that whole human connection. And that's what makes it very difficult for kids who end up on the autism spectrum. That a lot of those kids can have a lot of spoken language and can do and learn a lot, right? We're not saying that, but that social communication and understanding the perspective of others and sharing all of that higher order language can be challenging. So number 4 would be that they rarely share his or her enjoyment. But for a child to smile or laugh and then look back at you, right? And that there's this undertone of like, haha, that was pretty cool that I just rode that training bike or that little scooter, right? And that they'll hold a toy out to share and to acknowledge, like maybe it's a new book or a new puzzle, or they'll bring it to you as a form of, I really like this, can we share it together? And then as they approach that 12, 14, 16 month, say they're playing blocks in a box, or they're pushing a ball, or they're blowing bubbles with you. And if you stop engaging with them, that they look at you and they're saying, hey, come on, let's get going. Let's do this again. I'm not done yet. Right? And that they're enjoying the process with you and they don't want to stop. And so the whole key here is that you look for your child to reference back to you. That the whole foundation of communication, of verbal communication and nonverbal communication, is that there's at least two people involved and that you're sharing an experience. And so some children who do end up on the autism spectrum can be very, very verbal and can have a lot of single words when they're one, or can even speak in full sentences by the time that they're two. So we have to be careful that just because they're verbal doesn't mean that they use it to communicate, to share and enjoy the space with somebody else. The other factor that sometimes is hard to tease apart, and even professionals, whether they're a therapist or a teacher or even a doctor, that kids can have a social smile. They'll look at you fleetingly and smile, or smile because you smiled, right? But that's very different than having that eye gaze and smile back. Say you meet someone, the mom is holding their little one, and you say hello and you smile at them, and you look at kids splashing in a pool, and then you look at the little boy and you ask, oh, are you going to go in the pool? And he's looking back and forth and, not saying a word necessarily, but engaging with you on purpose, whether he's going to go in the pool or not. But he understands perhaps not the exact meaning of your words, but that you're looking at him, looking at the pool, looking at the situation, and he's using that as deductive reasoning. And that's connection. So some kids will look at you and smile passingly or fleetingly, and that's a smaller red flag, but it's still a red flag. Okay, a side note to help us separate kids who just have delayed language or a late talker from kids who are more likely to end up on the autism spectrum, where the delayed language kids are connected to other people. They're very social. They might not necessarily be kind of extraordinary extroverts. They still can be introverts, but they're still socially interested. And even when they're physically separated from their parents, they will use the eye gaze to check in. And as I indicated earlier, it typically strengthens between that 12 and 24 months as they gain more physical strength to move in their different environments and build their confidence in their independence. They'll separate more in any kind of environment, whether it's a playground or a home or a backyard, but they'll use that eye gauge very purposefully and with intention to make sure that their parent, their caretaker, is still there and that whatever they're doing is okay. And that's very different than kids who have more complex developmental issues and will end up having an autism diagnosis. So I just wanted to put that little caveat there to separate those late talkers from the more complex ones. Okay, so number 5, as a red flag, they don't consistently respond to the name. And this is a big one. And it's really, really hard, I think, for parents and teachers often to really understand what this means. So because most kids, most toddlers will ignore us from time to time. They'll get so involved in doing something, or they just honestly are so engaged, or there's enough background noise going on that they truly don't hear you because they're busy. With that being said, if they only respond rarely when you call their name, you being a familiar voice, and that they just simply don't respond, then that is a huge red flag. It's a big indicator. And I can't tell you how many times I have gone for a visit at a daycare center or a preschool, and I have called kids' names from across the room. I've even sat on the other side of the table and they don't respond. They're doing whatever they're doing and they just don't pick up their name that's very important to them, right? And it's a processing thing. It is that they can't switch gears. They can't shift. And that's very similar to the eye gaze too. How I've described it is because they can't take in auditory, visual, and motor kinesthetic data into their sensory system and integrate it. It's an overload. There have been even times where I've been in my own therapy room, which is relatively small. A child was playing and I scooch to the other side of the room and I said to Mom, watch this. And I would throw a truck or a block or something against the opposite wall and they wouldn't even flinch. So that's a processing element. That's a behavior that is telling me something, that things are not developing smoothly and that they're stuck with that process. Just a side note, most children, typical healthy average kids out there, will become alert to their names between 4 and 6 months of age. Yes, we have a lot of nicknames too, but their primary name, and then they're consistently responding by around 12 months. Again, give or take. There's some variability. And how I have learned over the years, because I have had a lot of mentors and people that I follow and listen to, but instead of saying to a parent, does he respond to his own name? I say, how does he listen when you call him by his name? Does he come right over? Does he just look at you and then turn away? Does he kind of smile and turn away? Does he run away? Because even if he runs away, then he's telling you, oh, I heard you and I'm not coming home. I want to continue to play here at the play yard or whatever. So take that into consideration, that the whole self-identity and being able to respond in an open environment and being able to take in conflicting information and still perceive that familiar voice and register his name and being able to acknowledge it in some form or fashion. So number 6 will be not babbling. And again, I think pediatricians, school teachers, parents, grandparents, a lot of us don't really understand what babbling means. And it really, really is important in the developmental hierarchy, in the process, because we build these skills. And I look at babbling as equal to crawling. Yes, you're going to meet parents, you're going to meet kids that will say, oh, I never crawled and I'm just fine, or I never babbled and I'm just fine. Okay, I believe there's a teeny tiny little percentage out there that would fit that. However, for the vast majority of humans, babbling is important. And this is that conversational style. It uses different sounds, consonants, and a wide variety of vowels. And I've shared before that there are 22 vowel sounds in English. Yes, there are 5 letters in the alphabet, but we mix and match these vowels to make different sounds. And ideally, by their 2nd birthday, they will have all 22 vowel sounds. But in this first year, 8 10, 12 months of age. They're babbling more than using real words, right? And I just have always used this as a reference. And there's this absolutely perfect YouTube. It's actually called Dad and Son Have an Adorable Conversation. And it was on ABC4, I think, out of Utah. And it was back in 2019. They have nearly 2 million views, but it was this young dad named DJ Pryor. I believe he's a comedian, and his little boy named Kingston. And I think he's 16, 18 months old at the time. But this little guy uses the hand gestures, the pitch, the inflection, the eye gaze, the head nodding, all of it. And it's just the most remarkable. All you have to do is Google it. If I remember, I will put a link in my show notes below. But it really is a perfect idea or a perfect video of how these 16, 18-month-old kids can have a conversation through babbling. And I realize that most kids don't get referred or are even seriously looked at their pediatrics office, unfortunately, until around their second birthday. And I'm not quite sure why a lot of peds still wait. I know that there are checklists and all of this that they're supposed to be sharing with you guys, but they look at the concrete. How many words does he have, or is he using 2-word phrases? And like I've said, a lot of kids who end up on the autism spectrum can acquire a lot of single words or even 2-word phrases, but the quality of their using it in real time is different. And babbling can demonstrate that to us, that it's because it's such a strong precursor to true words. So between 6 and 9 months of age, there's a lot of chains of sounds. Like they'll say ba 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 ba, ga 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 ga, ooh 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 ooh, ah 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 ah, and the vowels don't differentiate so much. But it really changes quality around 9 to 12 months of age. And so you'll look for things like inflection, like they'll ask a question, right? And it'll inflect up at the end. They will continually try to imitate words that they have heard you say. If you're playing and you'll say whoosh, because that's a very attractive sound, they'll try to say whoosh. If you're pushing the snowblower or something and you're just playing, or you're taking the lammy and putting him up the ladder and you'll say up, 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 up. And they'll try to copy you with the gesture and the tone of voice. At this age, you'll see a lot of exclamations like, uh-oh, if he accidentally drops something. They do that, and they're high chair, that. And they'll do that as a communication tool. They're done. They're really done eating. They're just playing a game with you now. Or if you accidentally drop something, whoops, or if they do bump their head or their knee or their elbow, and they'll say, oh, owie, owie, owie. Those are exclamations that they're playing around with. If you look at these exclamations, they're mostly vowels, or yummy, yummy, yummy in my tummy, 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 right? Again, there's patterns, but there's variation to it. There's a lot of vocal play. The initial early sounds with the consonants would be the lip sounds. That would be the M, the P, and the B, and then the W. So that's kind of a rounded owie, right? Owie. And then the tongue tip, which would be the T, D, doggy, right? And sometimes kids will get an N in there, like no, right? And then the back tongue sounds, which would be the K and the G. And a lot of times you'll see, especially between that first and second birthday, they'll be using a lot of those front sounds, those lip and the tongue tip sounds, and they have difficulty with those back sounds. But that should kick in around 2.5 years of age. But you should be hearing a lot of vocal play when they're playing by themselves and when they're playing with you. And then there are mirror vocalizations. So lots of time on the tummy, and they're going to be looking at themselves in that play mirror that you put up for them, or in the big long mirror that's in your bedroom. And as you're getting dressed, they're on their tummy looking at themselves. They're fascinated by themselves, and it gives them a lot of great feedback. So you want to hear that vocal play and a lot of babbling. Then just to get some vowel information, so you kind of tune your ear a little bit, listen for what we call low and non-rounded sounds. Just think about this, that the vowels, those 22 sounds, we have different jaw heights. And I mentioned this before. So we have high vowels where our jaw is pretty much closed, right? The teeth aren't really clenched. But that would be like the E, like an ow, E, or machine, E. You're having a tight smile, and your tongue is high and your jaw is high. And then you have these low, what's non-rounded means the lips aren't involved. It's really your tongue and your jaw. And like an ah, like in father, or ah, like in had, right? And so those are lower, your jaw is more open and your tongue is low on the floor. So you want those two contrasts. There are these middle vowel sounds that are harder, and this is why chewing and biting and all of those motor movement exercises are important to strengthen the jaw and give the child, your child, opportunity to move the tongue inside those mouth. But that's how we define babbling. And it's really different than just a few sounds here and there, right? And even if they have no, 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 or bye, bye, we want a lot of vocal play. So before we cover number 7, the final red flag, I just want to say thanks. Thanks for listening. Thanks for taking time out of your very busy day to learn more about your toddler and to strive to do your best. I'd also like to ask for a big, big favor. If you would be so kind to consider writing me a positive review. If you're gaining benefit and you see these episodes are helping you gain better insight and helping you support your child, that would help me expand my reach and truly support more moms just like you who are doing your best and putting your best foot forward. I will put a link in the show notes to make it easy. And let's get to number 7, the final red flag. So number 7 could be the most challenging area, I think, to talk about or listen to. Nowadays, it can be sensitive and a wee bit controversial, but it's looking at the repetitive actions. And it's important to address these kinds of behaviors that we might see, because it's a distinguishing factor in the true diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder. So if you look at the DSM-5, repetitive actions need to be in there. And that's what separates kids who have just a speech and language delay, are perhaps a late talker, or kids who have sensory processing issues. They don't necessarily have to present with some of these repetitive actions that I'm going to review. Think of it as their processing, their mind and their body kind of get stuck. We could look at, say, a child who switches the lights on and off, or who stares up into the fans as they're spinning, or perhaps even the blinds on the window. They'll just subtly move their head back and forth, and they'll see that visual stimuli. That's where the word stimming comes into play, but that visual stim is giving them feedback, right? They could also just watch the sand fall through their fingers in their open hand instead of actually using tools like the shovel and the bucket and dumping, or a digger truck or those kinds of things that they're engaged. And here they're just using it for a sensory input. They could also just watch the wheels spin on a truck as they spin it around, or anything that is in a circular position that kids will just spin and watch it, right? And so we can look at it and try to understand, why is he doing that? And most of us understand that it's soothing, right? It's relaxing. And that we all of us humans, do this from time to time. This summer, I'm going back and forth to a summer cottage, and I can sit on the front porch and watch the branches move with the wind. And I can just kind of sit there and relax and fade away mentally and physically and soothe myself, right? Look at the light reflecting on the water and just sit by the lake and watch it. It's a very sensory, soothing experience. However, and this is what I have said my entire career, however, the hours that kids can get lost in that self-soothing, they disengage in the opportunities in their environments with perhaps object play or engaging with other people, adults and children alike, and they reduce the opportunities to practice or to build and hone those skills, their processing skills, right? To move their body in physical space, to use their right side and their left side, to climb, to work at midline, like I've mentioned before, to cross the midline as they reach for another block to put it on their pile, right? And that the primary action is just kind of these self-soothing behaviors. But when we look at what we're trying to achieve with your baby and your toddler and your preschooler and your kindergartner, is that they wire their body. I've mentioned this before. They come into this world under construction. It is their life experience, the way that they engage with others and people and themselves, that finish the construction from the inside out, right? They learn by doing. They learn by engaging. And so, yes, some of this needs to be permitted, right? That some of these behaviors are great to chill and to relax and to disengage. We all need that. But how much does it interfere with their day-to-day learning? How much does it interfere with them being able to engage with the environment and with others? Again, we want to build neural pathways in the brain, communicating to your body and building all sensory system, those 8 sensory systems, which I've talked to about before. I focus on language and higher order thinking, like reasoning and thinking and problem solving, but we can't ever get there if the kid is struggling with learning how to roll over or to crawl or to stand, to pull himself up to a stand, or to clap or to reach across his body, or how he feeds himself. All of these things are wiring the neurological system, and he then is supporting all of that and learning through language, right? Nonverbal language and verbal language. And these experiences help hone his sensory processing skills. Keep honing and honing and honing. And so some other repetitive actions that you might see your toddler doing, your baby doing, are hand or finger flapping. That's a way to self-soothe. It feels good. Toe walking is often a common one. Now, all kids will walk on their toes, and they'll even, flap their hands from time to time. But that's on occasion. It's not most of the time. That's not how he's spending his day, right? They'll often stiffen their arms straight. And again, it's It's a way to self-regulate. It's a way because they're so excited that they want to express themselves and they hold it, right? Or kids will spin. Again, spinning for kids, heck, swinging back and forth makes me as an adult nauseous, but kids do it all the time, right? Kids love spinning. Those teacups at Disney World I loved as a child. They made me puke when I was 30 something or even 25 something. I mean, I went back there with my family in my young 20s and damn near puked right there. So some of this is typical. Some of this is natural. And yes, they are telling us that it feels good. However, I bring it back to what else is it telling us? So these behaviors are suggesting there perhaps is an overload, that it's difficult to integrate the incoming stimuli, whether he's just transitioning and going off to daycare or whether he just woke up for his day, right? And you're trying to get him to sit and have some breakfast, but he's spinning around, right? And so I always point out, and there's been some pushback the last, 5, 8, 10 years, but I always point out that we as human beings often self-soothe. As we grow up, we figure out more quote unquote socially acceptable ways to do it and not draw a lot of negative attention to ourselves. We tap our foot in a business meeting, or we bounce our leg up and down underneath the work table. We chew gum, twirl our hair, flick a pen switch. I've been accused of flicking a pen switch numerous times. Some people chew on ice. Some people pace back and forth to try to get their thoughts reorganized. We all do it. But when I look at a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old who's still building his neurological system, we have to say, what's getting him stuck? Why isn't he able to use this on occasion like the rest of us and then move on? And is it going to be problematic with his overall learning and maturation and processing? Right? We all need ways to reset. And I've had numerous clients that we've just weaved it into who they are. Like this one little guy who, I won't tell you his name, but absolutely a doll. He's probably in his 30s now. But, he was a hand flapper and a spinner and jargon kid. That's how he would stimulate and self-soothe when he was excited, when he was upset, when he was tired, when he was hungry. But we helped him be able to regulate it, to turn it on and off, to be able to excuse himself and go into the bathroom and do it privately, to be able to pace or walk in the back of the classroom and nobody batted an eye, to be able to chew gum. That was a big thing, to chew gum and not swallow it. That really helped him. To be able to flick his hands more subtly under the table. And I know, I'm not sure, 10 years ago or so, there are a lot of widget toys came out, and sometimes that can be distracting. But we have to understand, what is it telling us? Is it interfering with development across all areas? And then how do we shape it, just like all other development that we shape, right? We shape their speech and language. We shape their manners. We shape their eating. We shape their routines of going to work or going to school and playing and transitioning to bed and all of that. We're always shaping and helping them blossom into the best version of themselves. And so I do respect that we all have different tolerance levels and that we all process differently. I've always respected that. And I always joke, I hate shopping malls, period, the end. I hate it. I hate the concept. And God forbid that anybody asks me or forces me to go during a sale. That to me is torture. But I have friends who stand in line to go shopping on Black Friday or big sales. I can't stand that. That is torture. We all have different sensory systems. And when we look, like I said, at a 1, 2, or 3-year-old, how are we helping them be themselves at the same time, grow and learn and blossom to be the best version of themselves? So we do look at, does it draw negative attention in the classroom, on the play field, in the cafeteria, in a restaurant? We're social creatures. If we want, there is some variation. Pick the right type of restaurant, a family style restaurant versus an elegant, quiet 5-star. Watch movies at home and let them put the movie on pause and run around and then sit down and finish watching it. We have choices. But I do want to look at what these particular physical repetitive actions could mean. We all do it from time to time. All kids will do it from time to time. So it doesn't necessarily mean that your child will end up on the autism spectrum. I look at all of it as a big, long continuum, and that autism is just on one end of it. So to wrap this up, think of it as your baby, your toddlers are just starting out, that these behaviors are telling us how well or not they're wiring and learning how to self-regulate, how well they're learning to integrate this world. Does it interfere with their learning? Does it interfere with their experiential learning? Does it interfere with their social connection and engagement? I know that lots of kids can be reserved and they can be more or less sensitive, and lots of kids can be very introverted. I'm married to an engineer who is incredibly socially introverted, and my daughter ended up that way. So we just have these different proclivities. We have these different personalities. We do need to understand and respect our differences. I get that. But because I'm a developmental specialist, I look at always, how can we help the child build their skills to the best of their ability so we don't lower the choices that they have, or we, to put it a different way, that we continue to provide opportunity after opportunity, and that he or she doesn't have to not do something because it's too uncomfortable. So these are the most common red flags that all parents should be aware of. And then you get to decide what you want to do and whether it is problematic for you. I personally would recommend that you at least investigate and see how it's impacting his or her learning. So a quick wrap up, the whole eye contact and what that means. Are they using a lot of gestures as a precursor to verbal language? Does he or she imitate actions and those gestures? They love to copy us. Are they truly interested in sharing their enjoyment and their learning? Are they babbling and using babble language, right? Conversationally? Do they respond to their name consistently? That's the key, right? Do they respond to their name consistently? And what are their actions, their repetitive actions? How are they physically showing us how they're growing from the inside out? There you have it. I welcome any opportunity to answer questions. You can email me directly. You can DM me. Last week I got several DMs, and I just love setting up complimentary 20-minute, 30-minute session and answer your questions directly. I love it. So don't hesitate. Share with your friends and family if you're gaining benefit from these. And I really, really would welcome any kind of feedback and a positive review if you have it in your heart to do so. So thank you, and God bless.